Hey guys, what is up? Licidian back again with another Bedrock Redstone instructional video here. It's not really a tutorial, kind of going over some different redstone mechanics with the Bedrock edition. So today we're going to talk about t-flip-flops, and we've got a couple we've talked about before, so let's dive right into this. The first one here is the falling edge, kind of standard t-flip-flop. It's got a little redstone on top. You push the button. In Java Edition, this would always update this, but because of the way Bedrock updates its redstone kind of in a less consistent manner, then you get a less consistent response from this. So, interesting caveat to this, it says inconsistent, but there is a way to make this particular design consistent, and that is if you move it behind a monostable circuit. Place it behind a monostable circuit, what you end up with is kind of interesting, and I think the reason why this works, if you see, you can get it to consistently fire every single time, and I think the reason why this works is because the redstone ticks happen 20 times per second, but what actually happens with a monostable circuit is it comes on and kind of goes off in the same tick, which means that during that time, this piston says, okay, I'm retracting, and then it says, okay, I've already updated, and then this piston I can actually expand, I can go out, because it's kind of in the same tick, and this one's already updated, so saying, okay, I can update, and it kind of pushes it out. Now, somebody who knows a little bit more about this can feel free to correct my assumptions here, but I think that's why it works behind a monostable circuit and doesn't work in any other conditions that would make it any sort of consistent except behind this monostable circuit. You can place it behind any kind of monostable circuit. It doesn't really matter what kind. I just kind of chose this one because why not? All right, moving on to the next t-flip-flop. We got an item manipulation kind of t-flip-flop, kind of from maybe the older days of Java. I'm not really sure if this works anymore or not in Java. But you used to be able to place an item in a dropper, and if you put a button on one of the droppers and then had a second dropper, and these are facing into each other, and then run a comparator out of that, what you would get is when you push the button, it would pass the item across. And when you push the button again, it would pass it across again, but clearly that doesn't work. As you can see, the item is now stuck in this dropper and will never leave this dropper. An interesting thing you can do with this is if you run some redstone lines like out of the back of this one, out of the side of this one, or whatever, if you do that, the shortest redstone line from a single power source will win, and the item will switch. So if you had like a button over here with a redstone line and then kind of connect it up to a button over here with another redstone line, if you push this button, the item will swap, and then if you push this button, the item will swap back. It's a little tricky, but needless to say, I would call this broken because it doesn't really work in any case right now in any sort of way that you could really make use of, I don't think. Next up, we have kind of a standard rising edge T-flip-flop here. And this one, same principle. It is broken again. You could probably make this work a little better if you use sticky pistons. Maybe make it a little more reliable. But in the end, you're still going to end up with two pistons fighting in the same tick over the same block. And it just isn't going to have any sort of good results. Next up, we have a timed circuit. Now, this is using a repeater locking mechanism. And this only works with the stone button. You have to have a 0-tick or 1-tick repeater going into a 4-tick repeater, going into a solid block with a redstone torch, going into a 2-tick repeater. And with that setup, you end up where you can actually time this out and it'll turn on, and then time this out and it will go off. If you mess with the timing on any of these at all, this whole circuit breaks. This is pretty much the only configuration that will actually work for this sort of T flip-flop. But it is very reliable. Next up, we have another falling edge kind of block swapping mechanical T flip-flop here. And this, again, is kind of inconsistent. Problem is you get two pistons, again, fighting over the same block. One's trying to pull it down, one's trying to push it out that direction. In Java Edition, this is, again, very consistent in its behavior, but in Bedrock Edition, unfortunately, you just don't get the sort of consistency with your piston updates. So you push the button part of the time, and it'll suck it back down here twice, or 3 times, or 10 times, and then you push it again, and it'll go over there, and it won't come back, and it's just kind of a bad deal. Next up, we have another one. This is just a horizontal version of the vertical t-flip-flop that we have standing right here, and this one works exactly as well, meaning that it does not work. The next up, we have another timed circuit. Now, in the Java edition of Minecraft, you could actually leave this repeater on 1 tick. The reason why that works in Java edition is because when this kind of goes off and it fires up there and it lets that torch light up for a second and then pass back down, you would still get a technical redstone pulse out of here. With the 1 tick repeater, you do not in Bedrock Edition. So you do have to set that to 2 ticks to get this to work. This is just a dropper facing into a hopper that feeds back into the dropper with a comparator running out. And you'll see if we push this button right here, the light will go out. And then if we push it again, the light will come back on. And this is kind of easy and really works well. And as you'll see, a lot of the item manipulation type of t-flip-flops and as you observed in the tutorial, if you watched it with the monostable circuits, a lot of these item manipulation things are really, really consistent, and a lot of trying to move stuff around with like mechanical pistons and stuff just really isn't as consistent as it would need to be for some of these circuits. So as you can see, I put this back on one tick instead of 2 ticks, and we're just going to fire it up to show that it does in fact not work. The pulse is just a little bit too short technically for this to actually let it drop that item back out once it's in there. You do need this on 2 ticks. And there you go. All right, this is another timed circuit. Now this one is a little bit interesting. This one will actually flash on, off, and then on and stay on. And then when you switch it back off, it'll go off, on, off, and stay off. The reason why that happens is because you got this stone button. Actually, if you put it with a wooden button, it won't change states. It'll just blink. So it'll blink off, on, off, or it doesn't work right. But with the stone button, you get a little bit longer of a signal there. And so that lets this item travel from here to here and back, or back, whichever way it's going. It makes extra trips. And so you end up with a little bit of flashing. But here you go. This is this one. It says on, off, on, and then it stays on. And then if we do this again, it'll be off, on, off, and stay off. And that is it. So if you need a little, pulsing action there, and then the signal to stay a particular way, this is a great one to use. Next up, we have another item manipulation type of thing with some hoppers and droppers. So we got a dropper facing up into a dropper facing over into a comparator. And then underneath that comparator is a hopper that goes back into the bottom dropper. What happens here is when you push the button, if the item is down here, it goes up. If the item is here, it gets spit across into the hopper and goes back down into here. So this is just kind of an easy one, and it's pretty reliable. One thing I would mention on this is the same as the t-flip-flop version of almost this exact same, is the monostable circuit of this exact same build, which is just putting a solid block in front of it and a torch on top and then a button on it. The monostable circuit, when you're able to put a set of stairs kind of right here, and this limits the travel area for the item you're dropping, is no way to do that because you got a comparator on top of here. So if you're standing on this thing and you activate it, you could lose your item. So just something to keep in mind while you're debugging t-flip-flops using this sort of design. Maybe why it's not working. Oh, I picked up my item because I was standing on it. Okay, so this one, I've called this one broken. This is another used to work in Java, doesn't work in Bedrock. And if you watch, so this is just 2 hoppers with a redstone line running off of that torch with a comparator coming out of one of the hoppers. And if you watch this redstone is going to flash when you push the button. Unfortunately, it's not actually off for a full tick, and so it does not allow the item to travel from hopper to hopper, and so it just don't work. So there are flashes, but in Java Edition, that's enough time for it to travel. In Bedrock Edition, it is not. So this does not work. Now, you could potentially fix this-ish by moving where your button is placed. So you're not powering the redstone that's behind there. But then you're just kind of end up with this guy here, and you'll need a stone button, and then it'll be flashy, or it still won't work, or you could, trade it up and you end up with something like this. Either way, this design doesn't work as well as either of the other two of those that actually do work, so this one's just broken. And last but not least, we have a hopper dropper T flip-flop. Now this one is actually kind of fun. You got a dropper facing into a hopper, facing into a dropper, facing into a hopper, facing back into the original dropper. These are actually pretty cool because you can expand them kind of infinitely. You can just do hopper, dropper, hopper, dropper. Like you can just keep going and have a bunch of outputs, and every time you do, your button press, it does something different. And that's all well and good. But anyway, what we're going to do is we're going to fire this up. This is going to lock the back of that hopper back there. It's going to turn that light on. And then when you push the button again, it's going to fire a dropper to release that item, and everything turns back off. Pretty simple. And again, like I said, these item manipulation ones, they work pretty consistently. So that's all of kind of the designs that I have for T flip-flops from what would work in Java over into some really consistent ones for Bedrock Edition. Let me know if you guys have any other ideas or designs that I haven't covered here. And let me know what you think in the comments, like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.